We did a series of desk research and interviews around 7 large-scale public engagement projects, 4 in the UK and the rest were international. Our main question that we were looking for was to understand from the policymakers who initiated the programmes as to why they wanted to go large scale. So what was it that made it necessary for them to think that large scale was going to be the most appropriate, and then to understand whether their objectives were met, etc., etc. But what we really wanted to understand was why something went large scale. So we undertook that, and our main findings were that essentially that there were 3 main principal motivations. Either people wanted to undertake research effectively, they wanted to understand what large numbers of people felt about a proposed policy or how they might respond to a proposed policy, or they wanted to communicate and raise awareness, seek behavioural change from the public, so it was much more of a communications style of engagement. And for a few of them, there was the major motivation was actually simply to get citizens involved in policy making and in forming policy. So there were those 3 very different types of motivations, which then determined the type of process that was going to be most appropriate. And I suppose one of the most interesting findings was that on the whole, people wanted to go large scale as a defensive mechanism. They were going large scale for their engagement processes because they wanted that it needed to be robust, it needed to be credible with either the ministers or with the media. So rather disappointingly, people's motivations for going large scale was really to defend the process and the outcomes of the process. And that's I think the main thing that we want to try and undermine through the report that we're ultimately going to produce on this. One of the things we wanted to test out was the extent to whether or not research engagement needed ever to be large scale, and our feeling from the work that we'd done suggested that it doesn't. But we also thought that this might be quite controversial, so that was one of the things we were testing on people today, and with very few exceptions, I think everybody agreed that it really doesn't need to be large scale when you're undertaking deliberative research. So that was really good news. I think one of the other things, which means we're going to go away and do a little bit more work on it, was the sense of looking at large-scale processes in the context of small-scale ones, which we really hadn't done, but that we will go away and add some more work. We will prepare I think a very short piece, hopefully a one-sider, which gives a rationale for when is it appropriate to do large-scale, when is it appropriate to do smaller scale, and basically put large-scale in the context of smaller scale, because what we were hearing was that for people who are initiating processes, they really needed to make a judgment as to whether they needed to do a large-scale process or a small scale. So we need to go back and look at our findings in the context of smaller scale processes.